Well, Donald Trump, I'm going to say this once and I might never say it again. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for bringing Canada together. It took such a malignant, narcissistic slug like you to make us put aside all of our differences, all our regional fights, all of our concerns with each other, and realize that we actually had to stand up for something better, which is standing up for the rule of law, standing up for democracy, standing up for decency. And we know that we're on your border and it freaks you out because you and your incel gang are so freaked out about diversity, equity, inclusion, your DEI nightmare. Well, we are your DEI nightmare, Donald, because Canada is always going to be a country of diversity. We will always be a country of equity. We will always be a country of inclusion, and we will defend the rule of law. And if you want to continue fighting with us, you are going to lose at the end of the day. I'm not saying it's not going to hurt us, but we are true. We are North. We are strong. We are free, and we are ready for this fight, Donald. So make up your mind. Quit your fighting on social media with us. Tell us what you're going to do because we're moving on and we're going to stand and hold the line.
Stand up. Yeah, that's a way to start your day and the show, with another brave leader standing up against our fascist dictator, Donald Trump. That was Charlie Angus. He is a member of the House of Commons, member of Parliament in Canada, and he is not afraid to take on Donald Trump, and Canada is not afraid to take on America, it would seem. What a sad situation it is, but at the same time, this is where we're at, and Canada has a new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who took a defiant stand himself on election night against Trump. I'll bring you audio of that coming up. Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Stand Up. Decided to reach out to Ron Insana, who you might have known for his many years talking on television about important financial issues, economics, and more. Ron Insana is my guest. We had a great conversation. We went live yesterday on YouTube, so some of you might have seen us last night around 5 p.m. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't. YouTube.com/stand up with Pete, please. And you want to jump to my conversation with Ron, you can. It starts at about 40 minutes into today's show. But as I do every day, I've got your headlines and your clip show. Clips from yesterday, sound bites that went viral, and more. All of that coming up right now. I want to thank you for pressing play, for subscribing to the podcast. Subscribe on YouTube and Substack. I don't do ads here, but I do plug the hell out of the show and my work because it is completely independent and supported by you. Why should you sign up for a paid subscription? Well, the credibility here is unmatched. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've been bringing on the smartest people the entire time that know a hell of a lot more about these issues than most of us do. I do a pretty good job preparing and interviewing these guests and building their credibility with you. That's number one. Number two, I do it every day. So I'm here every day, so it's worth it just for that. Number three, we've created an amazing community that I didn't set out to do, so that's why it's so great, because it's natural. It's people wanting to come together because of the pandemic, because of authoritarianism, and so much more. Just humans on a journey together. That community is always online on the Discord platform. You get access to that. We have live events and so much more. The show here every day, it only costs $5 a month, but if you want to pay more, and many of you do, please do. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. That's today's ad for Stand Up and the Stand Up community. And now it's time for today's news. Here are the headlines that I've gathered for you from yesterday. Well, are you tired of all the winning? Americans' confidence in the economy slumped for the fifth straight month to the lowest level since the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, as anxiety over the impact of tariffs takes a heavy toll. The Conference Board said Tuesday that its consumer confidence index fell 7.9 points in April to 86, its lowest reading since May 2020. Wow, that is not good, I don't think. An important decision from the Supreme Court, or an important case, I should say, was argued. The Supreme Court seemed likely yesterday to rule narrowly in favor of a family trying to hold federal law enforcement accountable in court after an FBI raid wrongly targeted their Atlanta home. The justices seemed open to giving them another chance to sue over the raid, but wary of handing down a more sweeping ruling on federal liability in law enforcement cases. So that was argued yesterday. We'll talk with Siegel about that, but the family is a black family in Atlanta. FBI wrongly targets their home before dawn back in 2017. They pointed guns at Trina Martin and her then boyfriend, terrified her 7-year-old son before they realized they were in the wrong place. The FBI team quickly apologized and left, with the leader saying that his personal GPS device had him at the wrong place. So that argument was heard yesterday's Supreme Court. We'll see what happens. And while this probably won't make the White House's list of accomplishments, U.S. stocks have underperformed the rest of the world this year by the widest margin in more than 3 decades, as our erratic dictator's policymaking has sparked an investor exodus from American assets, is the way it was put in this article at the Financial Times. You know, I'm always reading the Financial Times. Yesterday, the Senate confirmed former Senator David Perdue as ambassador to China, just as the U.S. and China are locked in a tariff showdown that threatens to redefine diplomatic relations between the world's two largest economies. So he's a Republican who served 1 term as U.S. Senator from Georgia. He was confirmed with some Democratic support, which there is a lot of concern about. We'll talk about that later if I remember. Growing concerns about vaccines. I don't like it. Former government health officials fear that the Trump administration is moving to slow walk vaccine approvals, including by imposing new regulatory hurdles on drug makers, such as changing the requirements for approval, seeking additional clinical trial data as well. NBC News and others reporting the COVID vaccine from Novavax was expected to be approved earlier this month. Now the FDA is requiring the company to complete another new clinical trial. So there's a lot to be talked about that. I got to get Peter Hotez back on the show. I'm writing that down right now. Call Hotez. I keep meaning to do it, not doing it. I got to get it done. And file this under a wildly unnecessary escalation, says our friend Steve Bannon at Maddow blog. National security agencies across the Trump administration are ramping up investigations into alleged leaks to the news media, in some cases using lie detector tests that current and former officials say are creating a climate of fear and intimidation. Yeah, do you think if your boss was going to potentially subject you to a polygraph that you might act differently? Well, dozens of large posters with photographs of migrants in the White House claimed to have been arrested for various crimes now line the White House driveway that leads to the West Wing. Have you seen these? Every single reporter is standing in front of them. I don't think that they should. The posters, each with a large photo of a person, a human being, with a caption noting the crime that the White House alleges that they commit. They come as the Trump administration highlights its border policies as a key accomplishment of Trump's first 100 days in office, although it's not looking that way. His first 100 days in office, again, the worst of any president by almost every single metric one can measure. But those posters are real bad, and the reporters that are doing their live hits in front of the White House, in front of them, are you shouldn't. Stop it. Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that big marketers like MasterCard and Pepsi and Nissan are rethinking pride marketing in a bad way. Brands are shaking up their spending on LGBT pride, with more citing political pressure and economic uncertainty, is what they're saying. MasterCard isn't renewing its corporate sponsorship of the New York City Pride March, the city's annual march for LGBTQ rights, for this year. The financial services giant has supported Heritage of Pride, the nonprofit group that organizes the New York March and other area LGBTQ events, for around a decade, serving as a top-level platinum sponsor and preferred payment partner for the past several years, but not this year, MasterCard. So maybe rethink that, MasterCard, or let them know. That's a decision that's put it among a group of New York City Pride sponsors that are not returning this year. Others include PepsiCo, Nissan, and Citigroup, as well as consulting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. Most have not opted out of all Pride activities in the U.S. Some will maintain a paid presence to New York City Pride, the appearances such as branded booths, for example, while others are sponsoring smaller Pride marches in other cities, investing in private employee-focused events instead. Nissan's decision not to renew came as the automaker is reviewing all of its marketing and sales spending, according to their spokesman. You're right. Yeah. So they could change it more to Christian nationalism and white supremacy because they're terrified. That's bad. This is bad too. UPS announced that they're going to cut 20,000 jobs, close some facilities as it's reducing Amazon shipments that it's now handling. UPS looking to slash about 20,000 jobs, close more than 70 facilities. And I think it's like 4% of their workforce, I read. So that's pretty bad. Pretty terrifying. The results of Canada's election are in. Liberal leader Mark Carney has emerged victorious. Congrats to all of our Canadian listeners and friends. A remarkable turnaround for the former central banker. He's an economist, a financial expert. He rallied Canadians behind a message of economic sovereignty and national defense. His party, the New York Times says, was set to lose until Trump raised tariffs on Canada and made alarming comments about turning it into the 51st state. Mark Carney fought back, winning support across the country thanks to his economic expertise and resolute leadership. Carney had strong words for Trump in his victory speech and said, "We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons." I'll play some audio of him coming up. The new prime minister vowing to fight U.S. aggression while maintaining Canada's economic independence. And I got a great email from a Canadian listener named Aaron who said, "I'm breathing a sigh of relief this morning with the victory of the Liberals up here. It felt like everything was at stake as we are under attack, and it was so clear who Trump wanted to win. My kids have been following this closely with me as well and stayed up way too late last night watching the numbers roll in. Seeing the number of people who voted conservative was disappointing and yet not shocking. We had spent the last month counting the signs in our neighborhood and could tell it would be close. I got in a number of head-to-head matches with the father of one of my daughter's friends. I learned that other people I knew were voting conservative, and it created an uneasiness that I have never felt with my neighbors. My kids wanted a moment last night where I would dance and celebrate the victory, but it was hard to shake the anxiety that had built up. This morning, I forwarded the acceptance speech to my daughter, who's 13. This is what she really wanted to see last night when she could wake up for it. Prime Minister Mark Carney's words were eloquent, moving, and inspiring. I cried throughout much of the speech. He is a uniquely qualified and thoughtful leader. It feels like having him at the head of this nation offers us a little sense of safety in an unsafe world, and that's why I could finally let it out. It's a tragedy what's happening in the United States, and we all have to be on guard and fight, but sometimes you have to have a moment when you can just cry. I thank Mark Carney and all the people who worked so hard to bring the Liberal Party to victory. This morning, you have given us all space to feel our feelings. That's Aaron, and I won't say her last name, but I really appreciate you sending me that email, Aaron. It really hopefully felt good to hear for you and for everybody else listening, especially our Canadian friends. I would say our American friends. Everybody in America hearing that, I think probably is heartened to feel your feelings the way that you expressed them so eloquently there. Thanks a lot, Aaron, for listening, and thanks for sending that email. You can email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and I will maybe read it on the air, but I love your feedback and your opinions on everything. In other news, yesterday, the Trump regime fired Biden appointees, including Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum Board. And in their place, they just put German helmets. I kid, but would it shock you? The administration is also now pushing to build homes on federal land, which experts say could help ease shortages. Great. I'm sure it'll all work out. You might not have heard this, but apparently yesterday Trump signed an executive order that granted car makers some relief from his tariffs. So he reversed course on some auto tariffs. Manufacturers pay a 25% tariff on imported vehicles, will be able to avoid additional fees on steel and aluminum. They will also be exempt for a proportion of the cost of their imported components for 2 years. In other tariff news, the White House accused Amazon of a hostile and political act after a report that it would show tariffs costs. But then, of course, as I'm sure you know, Trump called up his friend Jeff Bezos and complained, and Bezos bent the knee, relented. Amazon said now it won't happen. Retailers are predicting shortages and higher prices come Christmas time. A $10 T-shirt, for example, could become a $24.50 T-shirt when a key tariff loophole closes, according to the New York Times. New York State is set to ban smartphones in schools. How about that? Our governor announced that New York will require schools statewide to ban smartphone use during school hours. The move, which applies to students in kindergarten through 12th grade, follows a national movement aimed at preventing compulsive social media use and distractions that interfere with schoolwork. Still no word from my daughter on how that's going to affect her, but I'm looking forward to get her response on it. I bet you she's none too pleased. Will they be able to enforce that? We'll see. Yesterday, Harvard's president apologized and promised changes after releasing reports on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on their campus. Yesterday, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, called Russia's unilateral 72-hour ceasefire next month a manipulation, as we talked about at Monday night's Hangout. A Navy fighter jet and a tow tractor fell off an aircraft carrier and sank in the Red Sea after the crew lost control of the plane. Somebody's having a bad day. A few people are having a bad day on that aircraft. Why is that not being blamed on Pete Hegseth, by the way? That should be his fault, I think. Did that ever happen when Biden was president? I don't think so. And apparently student loan debt collections are scheduled to restart on May 5th. There's a lot of explainers out there. If that's going to affect you directly, I highly recommend you prep and understand that. Let me know if that's going to affect you. I want to hear from folks. All right, those are the headlines that I've gathered for you from yesterday. Now it's time to get to those audio clips. Time for the clip show. I got to start by sharing Mark Carney's speech on Tuesday night, his acceptance speech at his election victory in Canada. It's not the whole thing. It's an edited version. The Guardian News actually edited it down to the best, I think, or most important 7 minutes, including when someone's phone went off. It might have been his daughter, you tell me. Here he is, Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada. It's very soft-spoken. He's not the king of flourishing rhetoric, but still, maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what we need. I don't know. It's a speech. I just wish you would have given a little bit more, but the comments and the content of it, I think, are really great.
Bonsoir. Oh, quel bonsoir. C'est un bon bonsoir. I have a question. Who's ready? Who's ready? Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me? You know, I chose to enter politics because I felt we needed big changes in this country. But big changes guided by strong Canadian values. And those include 3 values that I want to highlight this evening. Humility. It's Canada after all. Ambition. It's Canada after all. And unity. It's Canada. Humility is also about recognizing that one of the responsibilities of government is to prepare for the worst, not hope for the best. As I've been warning for months, America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. But we also must recognize the reality that our world has fundamentally changed. I began with humility, but Canadians are ambitious. And now, more than ever, it is a time for ambition. It is a time to be bold, to meet this crisis with overwhelming positive force of a united Canada. Because we are going to build, baby, build. Throughout our history, there have been turning points when the world's fortunes were in the balance. That was the case at the start of the Second World War, just as it was at the end of the Cold War. And each time, Canada chose to step up, to assert ourselves as a free, sovereign, and ambitious nation, to lead the path of democracy and freedom, and, because we are Canadian, to do so with compassion and generosity. We are once again at one of those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
But you're going to take us forward.
We have to look out for ourselves. And above all, we have to take care of each other. When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations. And it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options than the United States to build prosperity for all Canadians. We will chart a new path forward. Because this is Canada, and we decide what happens here. We will need to think big and act bigger. Your phone's ringing. Sorry, just okay. All right. Just hang on. It's okay? Yeah. It might be important. We will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations. The point is that we can give ourselves far more than the Americans can ever take away. But even given that, I want to be clear. The coming days and months will be challenging, and they will call for some sacrifices. But we will share those sacrifices by supporting our workers and our businesses. Canada is more than a nation. We are, and we always will be, a confederation, a sacred set of ideas and ideals built on practical foundations. That we know we're not always perfect, but we always strive to be good. We do things because they're right, not because they're easy. That we see kindness as a virtue, not as a weakness. Most importantly, we know that our strength lies in our resolve to work together as a country. It relies on our unity. United over our history, we have done hard, seemingly impossible things. United, we have built one nation in harsh conditions despite a sometimes hostile neighbor. Yes, they have form on this, the Americans. United, we have confronted our own past with Indigenous peoples. And now, in the face of this crisis, united, we are buying Canadian. We are exploring everything this country has to offer. We are supporting our friends and neighbors in the crosshairs of President Trump through a crisis that we did not create. United, we will win this trade war and build the strongest economy in the G7, an economy that works for everyone. Together, we will build a Canada worthy of our values. We will build Canada strong, Canada free, Canada forever. Vive le Canada. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, sir. Merci beaucoup. There you go. New Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. It's going to be a pretty volatile, crazy next year. The reactions from Canadians, the solidarity there. I'm looking forward to talking to more of you and seeing more of you as well as I move in to your guest rooms and stay for as long as possible in the Underground Railroad. All right. Well, now we've got to get back to American representatives, which sucks because I got 3 clips from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Yesterday, he joined Carolyn Leavitt in the White House briefing room, made a lot of news, said a lot of stupid things. I think they're important and relevant because we're going to have to hold his feet to the fire as he gets everything wrong, it would seem, but we will soon find out. Let's start with this.
From China, does the administration anticipate supply chain shocks or supply shocks coming now that cargo shipments from China are significantly down? And if so, are there plans in the process of how to address that?
I wouldn't think that we would have supply chain shocks, and I think retailers, they have managed their inventory in front of this. I speak to dozens of companies, sometimes daily, but definitely weekly, and they know that President Trump is committed to fair trade and have planned accordingly.
Okay, so will there be empty shelves? Will there be supply chain shock? It seems inevitable right now. Right now, it seems like there's a tremendous amount of evidence in terms of the lack of shipping that is coming into the U.S. that you can see with your eyeballs. Maybe all of those people somehow have that wrong, that are working at docks and ports across the country, especially on the West Coast. I talk about that a little bit with Ron and Insana coming up. So maybe all those people are wrong. Maybe he's right. That would be a good thing. Well, here's some more from Scott Bessent, who I'm predicting is going to get it all wrong and be a disgrace. History will not look kindly on this fella.
Chinese continue to say that the U.S. and China are not engaged in any consultation or negotiation on tariffs. You recently said you've talked to your counterpart, but more about, quote, traditional things like financial stability. So can you clarify, is the administration talking to Beijing specifically about tariffs or not?
Well, we're not going to talk about who's talking to whom, but I think that over time we will see that the Chinese tariffs are unsustainable for China. I've seen some very large numbers over the past few days that show if these numbers stay on, Chinese could lose 10 million jobs very quickly, and even if there is a drop in the tariffs, that they could lose 5 million jobs. So remember that we are the deficit country. They sell almost 5 times more goods to us than we sell to them. So the onus will be on them to take off these tariffs. They're unsustainable for them.
And they are saying you guys are not talking about it. So is that true?
Look, they have a different form of government. They're playing to a different audience. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty, again, of who's talking to whom. But as I said, I believe for the Chinese, these tariffs are unsustainable.
And very quickly, 2 days ago, you said you didn't know if President Trump had spoken to Xi Jinping. Do you know now?
Again, I would say Caroline and I have a lot of jobs around the White House. Running the switchboard isn't one of them.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That was his retort. That's not knowing whether or not the president talked to Xi, which he didn't. That's not, that guy doesn't, the Chinese dictator, he doesn't do that. He wouldn't call Trump on the phone like that, according to the Chinese experts that I've read, 2 of which I've read. So what the hell do I know? But I don't think they talked. And I thought that was a weird and a weak moment for Scott Bessent. Because, of course, he has no idea what's going on because Trump probably barely talks to him or tells him anything. He's out in the cold, in the dark. This dude's got to be really feeling it. I mean, every single one of Trump's cabinet secretaries must be. Obviously, Pete Hegseth is, and John Bolton thinks that he should be fired for his own safety. Here he is, the old evildoer himself on CNN.
Do you believe Hegseth should still be on the job?
No, I think he should resign for his own safety's sake, if nothing else. This is a critical time for the American military. We understand the Trump administration will rightly propose enormous budget increases for defense. We need it. We need a secretary who can get the job done, not somebody who spends his time on Signal chat groups.
And just as someone who is a national security expert, the fact that it was happening on his personal cell phone, how much does that concern you, knowing that foreign adversaries often target top-level national security officials to get into their phones and put in spyware?
Yeah, I almost never used my personal phone when I was national security advisor. I mean, the breaches of security at risk in this conduct are enormous, and I think that's one reason why he shouldn't be in the job.
All right. Well, what about Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary? He's a cabinet secretary. He's got to be feeling the heat right now. Here he is making all kinds of nonsense bullshit up for Caitlin Collins on CNN last night. And I think she calls him to the mats here with some facts.
Tariffs was one thing he made very clear on the campaign trail he was going to do. Maybe people didn't believe him. But he wrote yesterday that many people's income taxes will be substantially reduced, maybe even completely eliminated once the revenue from the tariffs comes in. But if you're making deals with countries and you're going to lower those tariffs, how are you going to have the revenue to cover people's income taxes?
Well, there is going to be revenue two ways. One, in terms of just increased trade, because if we have markets that are open to U.S. company and more things that are built here, that's a positive for America, because income taxes are one form of tax, but there's also many other forms of revenue that the government can generate. And so I think,
like what?
Well, certainly take a look at Interior. Under the Biden administration, revenue from using the balance sheet of America, the land and the resources that we have both onshore and offshore, were going down. And we have a tremendous opportunity through leasing of land for minerals, getting ourselves back in the mining. The war on mining is over with President Trump. The war on timber is over under President Trump. The war on oil and gas is over. All this thing is over, and now we're seeing investment coming back. And in those cases, those companies will buy a lease, they write a check to the federal government, and then when they develop that resource, they pay a royalty.
But that's not the argument he's making here. He's saying that the tariffs will generate so much revenue that people in a certain income level will not have to pay taxes. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the tariffs would have to be 4 times what they are now to actually make up for that. I think some people look at that and say the math does not add up.
Well, I think when you're taking a look at the opportunity that we have to balance trade and companies that have had free access to our market, even at the 10% level, this is producing billions of dollars a day for America if those stay in place. If they don't stay in place, because we end up with free and fair trade, we know that America can compete with anyone. And if we start building and manufacturing products here, as opposed to outsourcing that to around the world, that's going to strengthen every community, create more high-paying jobs. And with the advent of AI coming, that's another thing where we've got to have the energy to be able to produce the electricity to win the AI arms race. President Trump very focused on that.
Wow, what a mountain of bullshit that guy just spread, and I just shared with you so you could hear it and realize exactly what their dumb strategies are, and the fact that nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. By the way, the war on oil and gas is over? No, it's not. It never will be, and ridiculous. Everything that he just said was preposterous. That America can compete with anyone, anywhere? No, we cannot. And we will not. We are not going to do many of the jobs that they are saying that they're going to bring back. And we're not going to build those factories anytime soon, so that revenue that he said was going to be coming in as a result of us manufacturing things here is never happening. And if it did, it wouldn't be for years. So you would be running up huge deficits. It's preposterous. Everything that Doug Burgum, who is a clown, a real clown, and should be embarrassed, but somehow he's not. And he is working for Donald Trump. And anybody whose name is connected with Trump history will not look well on you. That I'm pretty sure. We'll talk in a few years, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case. All right, let's head over to Fox News, where they were having this focus group, and they didn't know what they were going to run into, because this dude Jay was real smart and went viral yesterday when he answered or pivoted on this question. Harris Faulkner, who is moderating it, asked, I think the question was, who is the leader of the Democratic Party? Dude's like, nobody, but he just pivoted right away from it and had a great set of arguments and talking points. And so he went viral, and I want to share them with you. Here's Jay, the black Democrat who spoke directly to Fox viewers, and the very strange Harris Faulkner in this clip.
I think that there is not a single person that we can look to in the Democratic Party right now to say that that's our leader. However, with that being said, I think taking the one person who's there over a party is also quite dangerous because of some of the things that he's done. Taking away due process from folks is not okay. He's quick to call out when he feels like his rights are being infringed upon, and yet the Fifth Amendment says that every person, it doesn't specify citizens, it says every person shall have due process.
So we don't guarantee constitutional rights to certain illegal aliens, particularly when they are suspected of violent crimes, which is why we have a finalized deportation list. And it's pretty clear. And I think some of the cases that are public now, individuals were on that. So where are you seeing that due process? I mean, to even get to that point, they must have gone through process.
Due process. Okay, so let's look at President Trump as an example. We call him a felon because he has been convicted of felonies. Some of these folks, without the actual due process, do not technically qualify as illegal immigrants because they have never had their cases heard. Now,
well, wait,
with
how
that
did they
being
get
said,
here is the question.
That's fine. But, you know, there's, just like we say when someone is allegedly being accused of something, it's the same process, right? However they got here, due process is what gives them that status of being illegal or not. So without that process, you're essentially just taking up people off of the streets, giving them this without their actual process and deporting them. Now, am I saying some of these people should not have been deported? No.
Do we agree that if you come across our border in an illegal manner that you have committed your first crime?
I believe you are entitled to due process.
That is the difference.
Yeah. Well, it's not what you believe. It's what Antonin Scalia believes. It's what the Constitution says. And Harris Faulkner has no idea about that, unfortunately. I guess I should mention that ABC's Terry Moran sat down with Trump in the Oval Office. I rarely play Trump on the show, and I'm not going to right now, but it's worth mentioning that it was an absolute disaster, specifically the whole thing, but when Trump attacks Terry Moran over and over, Moran is unflustered. But when Trump lies and says that Abrego Garcia had the letters and numbers MS-13 on his hand, if you haven't seen that clip, it's worth watching because it's real bad. But now I'm going to jump to the comedy. Let's get to Jon Stewart, The Daily Show. He hosts it on Monday nights. I thought this was real funny, and I wanted to end the clip show on it.
Even areas that Trump promised slam dunk progress have abjectly failed.
I will settle the war in Ukraine.
I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other.
Woman! Why are you giving away the secret plan? That's the kind of top-secret classified strategy you only divulge on Signal group chats. I'll talk to one, I'll talk to the other. But clearly, wait. Clearly. 24 hours has passed and no end. So what happened?
President Trump now claiming he was exaggerating with his campaign promises to end the war in Ukraine on day one.
The president said, obviously people know that when I said that, it was said in jest.
I'm going to end the war in Ukraine on day one. Is this thing on? By the way, I'm a little shocked Trump couldn't get it done, given his Solomon-like peace plan.
Putin would maintain control of the territory he's taken since invading more than 3 years ago.
Crimea will stay with Russia.
The president said today the U.S. will make no security guarantees to Ukraine.
So let me just try and absorb the specifics of the deal. I'm just trying to. Russia, who invaded a sovereign nation, gets everything that they wanted, and in return, Ukraine gets to give it to them. I'm obviously not a master negotiator, but I think I could have delivered that plan. Here's the kicker. After saying to Russia, well, what if we divide it where you get everything? Putin just kept bombing. And Trump is now reduced from the world's greatest negotiator to, oh, come on.
President Trump called on Russia to stop missile strikes on Ukraine and made a rare personal rebuke of Putin, saying, Vladimir, stop.
Vladdy, stop! It's in all caps, Vladdy. The commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful army, with the nuclear briefcase on one side, the direct red phone to Moscow on the other, decided the best way to demonstrate the seriousness in which he took this heinous bombing was to open off-brand Twitter and all caps, stop. Concerned face, bicep, party hat, eggplant, skull. And you'd be surprised to know that stop didn't work. Because Vladimir Putin is not a golden doodle. He is apparently a furry. But maybe it's not fair to judge Trump's negotiating skills based on the Ukraine war. He didn't start that war. We all know Ukraine did by wearing that province. You knew what you were doing, Ukraine, when you sashayed your pretty little Donbass all around the Black Sea.
All right, there you go. Jon Stewart, Daily Show last night. Now it's time to get to my guest today. He's a contributing commentator for CNBC, MSNBC. He's a public speaker, observer of all things economy and market related. You can check him out at roninsana.com and follow him on social media. Let him know that you heard him here on the show. I love catching up with Ron. It's been way too long. You can subscribe to The Market Scoreboard with Ron Insana. 60-second money news updates is heard on news radio stations throughout the day, nationwide. Check that out. Let's do it right now with Ron Insana. Oh, I'm so glad you were available. It's been way too long since we connected. I'm very happy to see you.
A long time.
We should do it. We should do it more regularly. I feel like right now, anyone who understands economics and finance, but especially shipping and trade and sports work, they are the epidemiologists of December 2019.
Yeah, this is our pandemic shock.
What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What is the panic like with you and all your finance bros?
So I think aside from all the confusion and the chaos, right, the real concern is around whether or not this stuff sticks, whether or not these tariffs are permanent, whether or not they're used for revenue, whether or not they're used for negotiating tactics to get other countries to do what they want. So we're seeing this incredible volatility in financial markets. Today we're up because Commerce Secretary Lutnick said on CNBC that we're close to a deal with one country. It's either India or Japan. We don't know which one it is. They wouldn't name it. And the baseline, according to one of my colleagues who's reporting out of Washington, is that the 10% tariffs stay, which would be a real drag on economic growth, certainly on imports, and it would affect our consumers and it would affect our companies that import goods here and manufacture or assemble products, even cars. They're exempting this, they're exempting that. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this. There is no end game. And I think that's the part that has most of us completely flustered. When Treasury Secretary Bessent the other day was talking about strategic uncertainty, and the real term is strategic ambiguity, and you typically use it in geopolitical conflicts, not in trade negotiations. It's this level of this, let me rephrase it. It's a distinct lack of clarity as what it is that we're trying to achieve and whether or not it will benefit the economy in any meaningful way. And there are opinions just completely scattered across the board with respect to all of it.
So coming back to where we're at right now, that was a longer term view of what could happen if this happens, if that happens. And it would seem, to be fair, you don't think there's any strategy at all. This is basically Donald Trump's id acting out day by day, right? No economy.
If I put my Freudian hat on, his superego is not at all in charge of this operation. This is entirely too much id. I think that what's crazy too is he's got this wildly misguided perception that the wealthiest period in U.S. history was from between 1870 and 1913, when we had one, no Federal Reserve, and two, no income tax, and we survived on tariffs. But it was obviously a vastly different world. The country hadn't been fully settled yet. There were a whole host of things that were remarkably different. No vaccines, no antibiotics, no technology. We were starting to go through the Industrial Revolution, and we were starting to grow faster than Great Britain.
There were kids in fucking coal mines, though.
Yeah, there were kids in coal mines. There were child labor violations of all kinds. If you read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, as early as the early 1900s, there were kids who were getting killed on the job. And there were all kinds of things that just aren't applicable to today. And we made revenue by tariffing or putting import taxes on goods that came to the United States. This is a wildly different, far more complex economy. And I don't understand. It's like this almost childlike or childish belief, a romantic belief that some period in history was better than the period we're living in right now, which if you're born in America today, this is maybe the best time in all of recorded history to be a human being, given that everything is accessible and available to you, obviously with some drawbacks. But I don't think there's any real logic behind this. There's also a misguided desire to bring certain jobs back to the United States that most Americans simply
explain that. That's a misguided desire, you say, but there's a misunderstanding of history at best. There's a misrepresentation at worst, but it's all misguided because this idea that you're going to bringing back quote good jobs or whatever, steady jobs, secure work to America. On one hand, they're talking about the 80s and before. And on the other hand, we're hearing people predict there's going to be no jobs left because of AI.
The robots, yeah.
Somewhere in the middle, Ron. Why is that wrong? Why can't we just build a bunch of factories and make it like the olden days?
David Ricardo, who's a very famous economist, he talked about the law of comparative advantage, right? So not to get too far in the weeds on academic economics, look, there's some things that we don't want to do anymore. We probably don't want to make T-shirts. We probably don't want to make textiles. We probably don't want millions of people putting pins into iPhones, and which is better done elsewhere at a much lower cost so that we can get our iPhone for $1,000 instead of $3,000 on people who are sadly making $3 to $5 a day in other parts of the world.
Killing themselves because the job sucks so bad.
And at one point, Commerce Secretary Lutnick said that's one of the jobs we'll be bringing back. And it's, good luck getting anybody, to spend $85,000 a year on college for their kids so they can go put pins into iPhones. What we've been very good at is progressing to a service-oriented economy. What we've been very good at is being a consumption-driven economy, which is 70% of GDP. What we've been very good at is creating advanced technology jobs, even as we've shed manufacturing. Now, part of the middle class obviously has been hollowed out. Part of that's been the result of trade policy. Part of that was the result of misguided U.S. managers who ignored these seminal developments in the global economy over the last 80 years that really changed things. The high price of oil allowed Japanese cars to come in here that were smaller, more fuel efficient, and had higher quality. A lot of things have gone into this. After World War II, we had about 50% of global GDP. That's because Europe was offline, Japan was offline, there was no China, there was no Latin America. And so ultimately over time, we were going to give some of that back no matter what. And so people have all these kind of weird conflated views about where we stand right now. We're still close to 20% of global GDP with 5% of the world's population. So it's still a good place to be. There are changes that need to be made, but they could have been done in a rational way that didn't alienate both allies and then also adversely affect adversaries in ways that we may not want to in the short and long run.
In the past, if you were reading a history book of American economic collapses or global collapses, you could look at from the Depression to the recession to the dot-com bubble, and it's a myriad of causes. Sometimes it's more complex than others. Obviously, this one seems to be entirely, again, because of one man. And I mean that for two reasons. One, he had an amazing economy handed to him that Biden and the Democrats basically saved. All he had to do is hold on tight. It would have gotten better with very few changes probably. And he could have taken credit for it. Instead, no conservative economist, nobody on the right was advocating for this. There isn't really a conservative theory that would ever say remaking markets and trying to punish your friends and enemies and starting trade wars is a good idea. This is just him causing potentially a global financial crisis. Do you agree with that?
I'm going to flip it a little bit. I don't think it's a financial crisis because it's not rooted in the types of problems that we saw with the internet bubble or the great financial crisis, where they were banking crises, where you almost saw entire systems go out of business. This may well end up being an economic crisis that is man-made, and it's Trump by himself being supported by people like Peter Navarro, his trade advisor, who is this a swearable show or not? I don't know.
Please, but go ahead.
Bat guano crazy. The guy's just a horrible economist. His stuff is not rooted in fact. And everybody who's supporting the president on this notion that we're going to bring back manufacturing jobs of some kind of the 1950s is just completely fallacious. We want high-paying, high-skilled manufacturing jobs. We want smart people doing smart things and getting paid well for that. We don't want to go back to the 1950s. And by the way, when President Trump renegotiated NAFTA and with the U.S., Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement, this was his agreement in 2018. We now have a fully integrated auto assembly village, if you will, that includes the United States, Canada, and Mexico. To try to tear that all apart and impose costs on the auto industry to bring everything back home from every little part that's made, or 85% domestic content, whatever it is they want, that is years in the making, multi-billion-dollar investments that he won't even see the fruits of if even we're successful at doing it.
Are you making any predictions about the next few weeks? When I see pictures of empty ports and I hear people who are kind of experts on supply chain, just in terms of what's coming from China, I'm told nothing's coming.
Nothing's coming. Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
And I'm told that you can't just flip the switch back on. It takes 8 weeks to get a ship filled with crates to America.
China, we haven't even started negotiating with China. The Chinese are denying that any talks have begun at all between Washington and Beijing. And the president said he talked to President Xi of China, and you're hearing that just didn't happen from the Chinese side. And again, like Seattle, the number of ships coming in, down. Los Angeles, that port, I think, is down 35% with respect to how many ships are coming in. And Treasury Secretary Bessent said, we don't think we're going to have an inventory problem because U.S. companies prepared for this. You don't prepare for Halloween, in February or March. That's not the inventory you're pulling in. Small toy makers are not seeing anything come into the United States. So all these small businesses that don't have any leverage with the White House, who aren't getting any exemptions, are going to get crushed in this, certainly in the next several months, unless something material changes.
I won't be a problem for me. I always wear the same costume, and I whittle toys for my girls every year.
You like the 1870s then, right?
Yeah. I whittled a pipe for my daughter last year.
So you got her smoking tobacco and sitting out on the front porch.
Yeah. So what about the idea that prices are also going to continue to go up? That was what the election was all about, apparently. Inflation hadn't gone down enough, even though it was on its way. And so what does this mean for prices? I mean, on everything, maybe everywhere from cars to groceries?
Certainly, potentially that's the case. We've got, as one of my colleagues reported today, and I think I mentioned this earlier, the baseline tariff is going to be 10% no matter what. And they think they're going to hold on to that now. And that's the result also of these conflicting messages about what the tariff is going to be used for. Is it going to be used to finance tax cuts? Is it going to be used to eliminate the income tax? Is it going to be used to negotiate with other countries to bring down their tariff rates? You can't do all those things simultaneously. What we do know from prior experience is that at the very least, it's a one-time price shock. Right. Even companies like Shein and Temu, which are these Chinese companies that sell very cheap goods in the United States and compete with the likes of Amazon. I think it was, I'm not sure which one it was. I think it was Shein that said they were going to raise their prices to 377% because of the tariffs. If you're buying a $2 T-shirt, it's going to be $6. And so there goes that. And that doesn't count what, if you're going to see a $5,000 to $10,000 increase in the price of a car. An economist I was on MSNBC with last night said that the average family, if these tariffs stay in place, even at the 10% baseline, will likely see $5,000 in increased costs per year, which not a lot of families can afford.
Everybody's going to see it, though. It feels like I need to start selling Trump did this stickers on my website or something. Because
and put it on a hat, because Trump 2028 hats are now selling apparently like hotcakes.
Oh, he was just teasing, though.
You think?
I mean,
without a distraction.
I think what's hardest for people in your profession and for any investor is that this man never does what he says and says what he's going to do, and he goes so back and forth. He vacillates on such important things that as we started talking here, you talked about we've gotten such an important lesson on how markets go up and down minute to minute based on a comment from the president, his Treasury secretary, the Fed chairman, and that gets put out on social media. We've also seen mistakes be made, things be misreported, and the market jumps up and down. It's crazy how unpredictable he is, and that's the only thing predictable about him. And that's terrible for the economy. It's terrible for business. It's terrible for investors. Fair to say?
Yeah, look, I hate using this expression because it's so incredibly overused that markets hate uncertainty, but so do businesses, so do individuals, right? Yeah. It's not just that markets are getting whipsawed here and going up and down with every tweet, every public statement, every utterance from anybody in the Trump administration. But when you inject this type of uncertainty, which really has a slightly longer tail than some of the other things we've dealt with in the past, businesses aren't going to make multi-billion-dollar investments wondering whether or not these tariffs are going to get rolled back and we go back to the status quo, and then all of a sudden they will have misallocated their resources. Consumers are going to hold off on purchases thinking that prices are going to go up, or they're going to buy it quicker and then not buy for a period of months. And so the planning at every stage of the economy, whether it's a consumer, whether it's business, or whether it's other governments, and the amount of global trade that's undertaken is at a standstill. Like when you talk about China and the ship's not coming or the ship's coming empty, this is a very big deal. This is not small stuff. There are some economists who suggest we could have a pandemic level supply shock.
Yeah, I feel like those predictions, they seem fairly accurate. About what kind of words are you hedging on that? It seems pretty almost inevitable based on what's happening. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just collecting information from what I'm reading, but I usually read a lot of credible people and then I put consensus together in my own stupid little brain. But I feel like you're not too panicky, but that's also your face.
Yeah. Look, there's a difference between my face and my stomach, right? I wake up every day and by 7:15 I have knots, and I'm sitting there and I'm either pissed or I'm upset and I'm trying to figure out what's coming next. But look, the worst case scenario is that this persists for far longer than we can imagine, particularly with China. And we're locked in what the Treasury Secretary himself called basically an embargo, a trade embargo with China. That will have repercussions around the world. And look, we're not making friends with Canada. You heard the newly elected Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who, by the way, should not be trifled with. He is Harvard and Oxford educated. He was the head of the Bank of England. He was head of the Bank of Canada. He's no dummy. He's a real guy. And he's looking for other partners than the United States.
Did you ever hear a rumor reported that Mark Carney and the Canadian government quietly bought up like tons of Treasury debt and then called the White House and were like, you guys didn't know this, but we bought a bunch and now we have leverage and we're gonna put the cards, we're gonna call you to the mats. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that rumor. Yeah. And look, I don't know what they have. So let's go down the list. So Japan has one.
Any solid reporting on it, just to be clear.
Yeah, same. I heard the story, read a rumor about the story. Japan has $1.1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds. China has $760 billion. Europe owns quite a bit. China probably owns more than $760 billion because they launder some of their purchases through Belgium and other countries, shell companies. But at the margin, if Canada had amassed, let's say, $100 or $200 billion worth of treasuries and decided to dump them all at once, dollar would crash, interest rates would spike, and we'd have a real problem on our hands. And it might encourage others to do the same, in which case, if you get a run on the dollar and a surge in interest rates, that throws us into a very deep recession immediately. We're already struggling with, at least in terms of mortgage rates and auto loan rates, they're all pretty high relative to the recent past. And credit card delinquencies, home loan mortgage delinquencies are at levels normally associated with recessions. So any push in the wrong direction tips us over. So yeah, that could be a real thing. And that's, if he's really going to play that card, it would be self-defeating. We all know that move, no matter who does it, is mutually assured economic destruction. But given what we're doing or what this administration is doing, someone might take the risk.
Yeah. Just another question about the health of the dollar as the world reserve currency. The things I've read about that are the scariest scenarios that it could be under threat and what that means. I don't really understand it. I don't want to understand it.
So you don't want me to explain it to you?
Do I need to? Is it going to happen?
It's important because we borrow a lot of money and we borrow in dollars. And in a lot of cases, other countries borrow in dollars. And if their currency should devalue, their debt servicing costs can double overnight, like we saw during the Asian currency crisis back in the late 1990s, or the Russian crisis in 1998, or the European debt crisis in 2011. When you're borrowing in dollars and your own currency weakens, the cost of servicing that debt can go up, could double, right, overnight, and throw you into recession, create inflation. We don't want the dollar to lose its reserve currency status because it's so integral to the underpinnings of the global economy. Foreign central banks hold dollars and they buy treasuries as the safest asset they can own. If that goes away, we lose an enormous amount of global power economically. And again, we also run the risk of this dollar flight that would wreck the U.S. economy.
That sounds great.
And it's a lot of fun at parties to have this conversation.
That's funny. We're live on YouTube, and my friend Kim messaged, fancy Ron Insana waits until 7:15 for his stomach knots.
She must get up earlier than I do. I get up at 7. I read in because I have to get a couple radio reports done by 7:30 a.m. So as soon as I flick the computer on, I've made a cup of coffee. I look, I get sick, I do my radio reports, and then I stew for the rest of the day.
What did you make of the reporting that apparently is pretty well confirmed that Trump got word that Amazon was going to put a warning on price increases that they were due to tariffs? So Trump calls up Jeff Bezos, who's pretty good friends with, and Bezos is not going to follow through with it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
It's permeated all of business and to a certain extent the media as well. We're in the phase I would call premature capitulation, where everybody's giving up without a fight. And I don't understand it. They're worried about their legal status. They're worried about if they're going to do a deal, the FTC will block it. They're worried about getting sued by the Trump administration, having to spend time and resources fighting that for God knows what reason. I'm shocked at the lack of intestinal fortitude shown by businesses, law firms, and some universities, that they're not willing to stand up for the things that they believe in and immediately buckle. I've never seen this in my life.
How concerned are you? Last question, Ron. How concerned are you about the cuts to the federal government funding that NIH does for science and research? You can make a pretty easy argument that America is the richest country in the world because of our investments in our own scientific research and everything that we sell as a result, treatments, drugs, et cetera. But what do you make of these DOGE cuts, which, by the way, now there's some reporting, and I think it's probably going to turn out this way just based on the damage that it's done, the uncertainty that it creates, that they're going to cost these cuts, the federal government will actually end up costing the taxpayer more money than they ever save because of the damage that they do. These investments that the federal government makes in the private sector, often you get a huge bang for the buck in any number of investments. So what do you make of all these federal government cuts and the damage that they are going to do short-term, long-term, period?
I'm hoping it's short-term, and I'm hoping that some of these funds have to be reinstated because they were congressionally appropriated, and the president does not have unilateral power to cut those funds, nor does Elon Musk, who's an unelected bureaucrat who hates unelected bureaucrats. The irony there is not lost on many of us, I think. Look, I am concerned, particularly in science and health, that those cuts are not only draconian, but they will have huge downstream implications for our position in the world when it comes to science and technology. Think of this, just nylon stockings. Where did they come from?
Nylon? What is the raw material? Is it, I don't know.
How did we end up making nylon stockings?
Parachutes
in World War II.
I was going to say, if you didn't interrupt me, I was going to say it was parachutes in World War II.
But so all the stuff that the government spends money on and invests in, whether it's DARPA in the Defense Department, where they put a lot of money into companies that engage in cybersecurity protections, all these different areas, healthcare, cancer research at the university level, which is being funded but now being taken away. That $2 billion plus that they're clawing back from Harvard, that's mostly medical research. And we are at the forefront of developing diagnostics, treatments, drugs, new technologies to detect diseases before they're fatal and can then be treated. When you start cutting all that stuff, the downstream is horrible. We already went through a period during COVID where life expectancy for Americans fell by 2 years. It's huge. And it was on an upswing that if you lived, for every year that you lived, you're basically adding another year of life expectancy at one point. And so this is truly horrifying. And I don't know how we get out of this, for lack of a better term, death spiral with respect to these funds. Congress needs to reassert its power of the purse and demand that the funds that go towards life-saving research, that go towards support for, and look, some people may view this as some sort of kind of lefty type of sentiment, but the money that we use to support the poor, the young, and those who require an education to move ahead. There's some talk about cutting Head Start entirely, which has been one of the most successful government programs in educating and feeding poor children in the history of this country.
Yep.
It's just abominable that this stuff is being undertaken.
Yeah, the data on that is so well done and determines your success at age 18 if you had early childhood education, like a good Head Start program. Where should I go? Like, what should I buy right now? I'm going to go buy stuff. Do you go to, you should go to Costco, right? Like, I should always go to
Costco is a great deal because you can still get the $1.50 hot dog. That has not changed in price ever. And yeah, Costco is one of the best, most insulated companies from a price perspective through this tariff stuff, more so than any of the other big box retailers.
Why?
I think some of their sourcing is not entirely China related, and so they're somewhat more immune to this. But yeah, like, I think Amazon now is not going to post the degree of pricing that's affected by tariffs, as you alluded to before. So you're going to see price hikes there. And you can figure out why on your own. It doesn't have to be sitting next to the price as to why it went from $3 to $7. But look, I like Costco a lot. I've liked them as a company for a long time, and they do a phenomenal job. I don't think you punish a lot of U.S. retailers because of these things that are out of their control. What's really crazy is imposing tariffs on countries that like export vanilla to the United States, which we can't possibly grow. We also can't grow coffee in the United States, and we're putting tariffs on coffee beans. This is just stupid. It makes no sense.
It's like things that people buy almost every day that you can't, that people that are not political, that pay no attention. There's going to be like, my gas is way up, my coffee is way up. These are things that people often buy every day, a cup of coffee, or every few days. It's going to wake a lot of people up. They're not paying attention.
Yeah, coffee will finally have a dual use. It's going to wake you up, and the price will wake you up as well.
Yeah.
I think, look, if we get lucky, this is going to be one big bluff that gets a lot of kind of nonsensical deals that really don't move the needle, and they walk away, declare victory, depart the field, and we go back to worrying about how much the tax cuts are going to increase the national debt. More pedestrian, if you will, concerns, which in and of itself is going to be a problem down the road. But if they're serious about this, and if they're serious about leaving the 10% tariffs on, and they're serious about punishing China, it's going to be a bit of a slog. And the market's going to swing crazy, and prices are going to go up, and we're going to have some sort of stagflation, slower growth, more inflation, and we're going to have to tough it out for a while.
In the chat, there's a question. Any idea why Trump's obsessed with tariffs? I heard a great theory, which makes the most sense to me. Not only did he learn about the tariffs, as you mentioned earlier, the McKinley and all that history, he's always talked about it throughout his career. He's talked about tariffs and the value of them. But I heard this theory that because he's such a selfish, self-interested, the putting out the tariffs mean all these countries have to come to him and ask him for something, and he gets to decide. He wants that. He wants everybody to come and beg him for whatever they want, whatever they need. That's why he's doing it to all the countries, and he can talk about it.
And companies, right? Because they're the ones who are asking for exemptions, then also have to bend the knee and say, listen, would you exempt us from these tariffs? Would you help us out? So then he's in the position of granting favors, right? So, yeah, there's a weird psychological component there that I think is at least in part true. There is, though, this overriding, and I don't understand it, and I don't know. Clearly, if he went to Wharton, this is not what he learned at Wharton Business School. That the period from 1870 to 1913 was the richest period in American history.
Right.
Household net worth is over $150 trillion. Among major countries in the world, we have the largest per capita GDP. We have the largest GDP period. We have a 4.2% unemployment rate. Yes, we have problems that need to be addressed. No doubt about it. This ain't the way to go about it.
You are the best. I hope you'll hold our hand and then eventually feed me by hand.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I got to see if my career holds up during this period. It's one of these weird things that God knows what happens during a recession.
Your wife would be like, Ron, is Pete going to stay here much longer?
We do have a basement bedroom, if you like. We call it, what do we call it? Cloud 9, I believe, downstairs for guests that has its own bedroom.
I assumed you did, and that's where I will be. Thank you, buddy.
You're more than welcome to be there.
very much.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you.
End the stream for everybody. Thanks, everybody, for watching. There we go. It's over, Ron. Ron Insana, everybody. And that was live yesterday on YouTube. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do. YouTube.com/standupwithpete. They'll let you know when I go live with whoever my guests are. Hopefully I'll get it into some kind of routine and schedule that'll be live around the same time every day. But I'm working it out, trying to figure it out. A lot of balls in the air, and I appreciate you helping me catch them and juggle them and support me doing it all. Thank you very much, you bumblebees. Jon Carroll writes and performs all of the music for this show. He's a legend singer-songwriter. See him on tour and go buy his album, joncarroll.org. Be the change that you want to see in the world, and I will talk to you tomorrow here on Stand Up.